everybody, I'm Yvonne Williams with Back to Earth Creations, and in this video I want to show y'all how to make your very own chainmail and wire wrapped pendant. You could use gemstones, you could use polymer clay, you can use beads, you can use whatever you want. So let's get started. The materials for this tutorial, we're going to want to start with a bead or cabochon that's already been set in a half Persian 3-in-1 chainmail bezel, which I'll put a link coming up on the screen as well as down in the video description, where also all of the tools and materials used in this video will be listed. Here I have a 30 by 22 millimeter cabochon. Don't know if I already said that. Set in 20 gauge 1/8 inch chainmail, aluminum rings, but you could use any size bead or cabochon as well as a variety of different sizes for this weave. This is just what I'm using. I also have 4mm rose quartz beads, 3.2 millimeter silver beads, and then like 2 point something, maybe 2.5 millimeter beads that I'm making a big old mess with. There we go, just spill those everywhere, that's great. I also have a few more of my 20 gauge 1/8 inch aluminum rings, and then two 16 gauge 1/4 inch aluminum rings. I'm going to be using 26 gauge wire, though you could also use a 24 gauge. Much thicker than a 24 gauge I wouldn't recommend, and much thinner than a 26. You might start wiggling in between the openings and closures of your chainmail rings. But again, use your artistic discretion and do whatever you like. I'm just using my favorite chainmail pliers, some flat nose and bent nose, with the modified handles, which again, I'll link to a video somewhere maybe, showing you how to modify out your own pliers. And so I'm actually going to start by pulling off about 18 inches of this wire. It's 26 gauge parawire. I highly recommend parawire. Super affordable, super durable. Comes in a bunch of colors. And I'm just going to thread one of our it's 3.2, but I'm going to call it a 3mm bead, a 4mm bead, and then another 3mm. And I'm going to bring this down to where it's centered up on my wire. Now, you'll probably want to use, you can see just kind of in relation to the size of my cabochon, go ahead and give yourself more wire than what you think you might need if this is your first time doing this, just to let yourself gauge it out. And I'm going to try to find, this is a lot easier on round pieces, but I'm going to try to find the very bottom center. And I'm going to feed up through these little holes that this chainmail bezel makes. Let me see if I can't zoom in just a bit for you. So you can see I've threaded in from behind through to the front. And then I'm going to come over, because I want a little bit of like a picot edge. I'm coming over two, like 1, 2 little spaces, and then feeding up through from behind, and you can see I'm capturing through both this ring and like both of those little rings. Pulling it up and through. You can see now I can take both and just pull it nice and tight. And you can see right now it's leaning very much towards the back. With it pulled pretty snug, I'm just going to push that forward. Now also, you'll notice on this bezel, I have only gone through and secured the edge with a little bit of Mod Podge Dimensional Magic. I haven't filled it in with the 2-part epoxy yet, because that can have a tendency to fill in some of the holes, and that makes doing the stitched edge much more difficult. So just be careful at this point, if you haven't completely set it, to not rip your bezel off of your stone. Just because that'll happen. And now you can see I'm splaying them both off in opposite directions, almost like little antenna. And now I am going to do, and you can do whatever repetition of beads that you want. You could have just done a single bead there on the side. And we could do this super simple and just go from here to like a 4mm to another like you don't have to do a full edge. In fact, I think I'm just going to show you guys the small version. Oh Lord, I am spilling beads. Sorry, I'm experimenting with these new bead trays. They're actually little pieces of scrap plastic from bead packaging, and I'm like, you know, that might keep my beads from rolling all over the place. Well, if I'd quit tipping them, you know, the best, better theories, I guess. But okay, I've threaded on a 4mm bead, and then I'm just coming through. If I entered through this one, then I'm coming around to the back side, very much like a whip stitch for those of y'all who've hand sewn. And I'm just pulling it through. There's a view from the side. And again, you want to keep it nice and snug, but you don't want to be hard on your wire, and you don't want to rip your bezel off. And I'm going to experiment a bit. On the other side, I'm going to do a 4mm bead before going too much further and see if... Bless you, neighbor who's sneezing. See if I like the way the 3mm bead looks better. Yeah, I kind of do. I don't know. I don't know what I like. I'm going to actually see if just a little... Oh, that looks pretty. We could just have that down off to the side. So, I mean, explore all your different options and things of bead placement, because I could have just done that one, this little 2mm, and then continued, just lacing around to stabilize it, finishing it off, which I'll show you how to do that. But for now, I'm going to continue around with this full pattern. So I put on a 4mm bead, so now I'm putting on a 3. And again, I entered through here. This is the back side. So I'm going to come in just through the next hole, threading through both of those little rings. And now another 4mm bead. And this can, I mean, it's pretty simple and straightforward, but it leaves you so much room and variation for modifying and customizing to suit your own purposes. And I'm going to be showing y'all a couple more tutorials in the future on how to embellish with wire wrapping this basic chainmail setting. So we're just going to continue just whip stitching around. And I think this gives it a very kind of Victorian like brooch look. Which that's, if you want this as a brooch or as like a fully encircled pendant, you don't even have to, like, we'll discuss it more as we get there. Some different finishing options for doing a bail or, different stuff. Okay, now for the sake of symmetry, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side, because you'll notice we're getting a little offset. See how there's a little bit of a slant happening with the beads here? So I'm going to keep doing this to the other side. Yeah, we did a 4mm. Exited this one, so we're going to enter up through the back. And it's not quite as tight as I would like, so I'm actually just pushing that bead back through, or that wire back through, and then tightening that down. And now tightening that down. There we go. Nice and snug the way I want it. Because I don't like a whole lot of movement on the beads, because over the years that'll put more stress on the wire, I think, of just, the sharp edges of the beads kind of wearing on it. Then just sliding that through. Coming around like that. And I think at this point y'all kind of get the idea, but I am going to continue recording excuse me, just in case something crazy happens and I'm like, whoa, this was not expected. How do we deal with this? because you never know when that's going to happen. And it's okay whenever it does, because it's wire. It's going to break unexpectedly on you. So we've reached it much sooner on this side than what we did on the other, where I'm going to go ahead and do another stitch, but where that off slanting is really kind of making everything tip a little bit more. Doing our third bead. Also, another reason if I really prefer to do this before epoxying the back, yeah, like you'll be able to see here on this one, this is super duper offset, and sometimes that'll happen. Whenever it does, just pull out your wire, reposition your bead, and then pull it tight. Help you get a nice, tight, even stitching. And preferably I would have had beads with smaller holes, but this is life now. But you can kind of see, even though I started as close to the center as I can, these aren't as perfectly even as I would have liked for them to be. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to slide on our next bead. And instead of stitching through this hole right there, instead of stitching through that one, I'm going to come up one, kind of skip a bit, and tighten that down. And so you almost can't even tell, I mean, unless you're really looking at the stitches, but it's kind of almost like hitting the reset button. There we go. Sliding on another one. And instead of threading through that one, we're going to skip it. And I prefer to do that symmetrically, but you could do it randomly if you rather. You could use all different sizes of beads around the edge of one of these and make it look very just exciting and different. Okay, threading on another bead. Nothing if not repetitive, but I think that's great because it gives you an excellent opportunity to really get the hang of it. I've also found that just going ahead and holding your bead in position and then pulling down kind of streamlines everything, so that you don't have to worry about, you know, going back and messing with your wire, like fighting with it. So I'm just holding that bead right there, snug up against my work, and then pulling through. And this is coming along nicely. I've done edges before that around like a quartz bead with like gemstones that correlate with like chakra colors and rainbows and all sorts of stuff. This is also a really great way to edge tree of life pendants. You can actually take like a, you know, and I think I'll do a tutorial on that, of taking a metal ring and doing the chainmail bezel around it, and with a tree of life in the center, and then this edging. Because I really like it because it gives a heavy edge, but a nice open, because there's no cabochon. I mean, you could totally put one in and then do the tree on top of it. Oh boy. Sorry, at the time of recording, it is actually New Year's Day, first day of 2018, so that'll date the video. And I'm so excited about all these different new ideas, and I don't know, just it's a perfect time of year to reset, kind of, you know. And I've got a lot of ideas for projects coming up. I've had a lot of really excellent requests from y'all, and I'm very, very excited to you know, get started, but gotta tackle it one project at a time. Also, I'm going to apologize for my heater in the background. It's 3 degrees outside right now, which, I mean, there's people, you know, in the negatives right now, so I feel pretty lucky, but it's still colder than I would prefer. At least it's, and they say this about the heat too, but at least it's a dry cold. It's not like slush and ice outside. 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this way it's really going to let us, being able to just count the beads is a really nice way of maintaining symmetry as well. And I do like to press them evenly because I'm going to show y'all how I'm going to finish the bail up here at the top. And maintaining that symmetry the entire time you're weaving can do so much to make your bail placement just simpler. Excuse me. I'm going to go ahead and do another reset. Just skip that one and poke it through there. And there's no science to doing the reset stitch, because that's what I'm calling it all of a sudden. It's just to do it as you feel necessary. Your project might be behaving completely differently than mine. And again, don't even feel like you have to do it symmetrically. It's a subtle enough of a thing that, I mean, it's not going to be the end of the world if you did it on one side and not on the other. I mean, it might be. Who knows? No. Okay, placing it in my thumb. My wire's getting kind of short, so I'm coming in and using my pliers. Just pulling that down. Now, we have a couple of different options here as we get close to being finished. I could do another stitch, very much like how we did at the beginning, just kind of stabilizing it off here at the top. I could add a 6mm bead, trying to fill that up a little bit. Like, you can attempt, like, I could have maybe back stitched a few, not done a skip stitch there, and made it to where it's just evenly stitched all the way around, and then used a brooch back in the epoxy to make this into a pin. But I'm going to show y'all how to do this as a pendant. Now you can see, maybe if I keep my fingers out of the way, I'm just going to come around and into this same hole that we've threaded through before. I'm just lacing up and through one ring in the back. So grabbing it with my pliers to give myself more control, and then just tightening down that little loop. And now I'm going to do that same thing again, also in that same ring, just stitching through. And there's no pressure, like no tension on these beads, so you don't have to do this a whole bunch. Be careful when you tug on it that you don't distort this ring. Ideally, I would have made this bezel out of stainless steel, but aluminum is what I had, and it works. So now I'm going to come through and do the same thing on the other side. Just coming through. And I do this just on the back because it still gives us a very nice and clean front. And so just grabbing it, pulling it through. And one more through that same stitch if I can swing it. Sometimes it helps. I'm gonna to curve the end of your wire a little bit. And if you're having difficulty, just try coming at it from a different angle. There we go. Got that to come through. Just be patient with yourself. If your end gets all muddied up, just trim it a bit and then try again. So there we go. Now I'm going to be using my wire snips to come in and very close in to the wire. Snip and snip. And now I'm going to use, oh, I don't have them over here by me. Typically I have my super petite bent nose pliers. I think they're over by my sewing machine right now. But so that I could get in there and make sure that there's no little snaggy weird ends. You can see that did pretty okay. Because you want to be able to wear this over a knit shirt or very sensitive skin and not have to worry about any scratching. Okay, so now I'm coming through and opening up these are super cool pliers that I want to show you guys. They're great for little chainmail and big chainmail too. They're like little micro flat nose pliers. I'm going to open 4 of these rings, these 20 gauge 1/8 inch aluminum rings. Again, if you can go with steel, do that. I'll put links down in the video description to both the aluminum and the steel options so that you can choose for yourself. Okay, so we have those 4 open. So now I'm going to come through and hook through this center right there like that. Let me zoom in just a bit more for you. I'm actually going to open a 5th ring as well, and I'll show you why. But we have it through there, so now I'm going to grip and close. Try our best to get a very solid, clean closure. And I'm going to open up a 5th one, because the way it played out on this setting is I don't have a spot where I can just do the 2 centered. So I'm going to try to do 1 ring through here and then 1 ring through here as well. Let's see if they'll fit with all that wire wrapping, because they might not. And if they don't, then we'll have to figure out what to do. Come on, ring, you can do it. Maybe. Okay, it's having trouble. So what I'm going to do is... oh, where are you at, tool? Here we go. I have a little awl here, and I'm going to try really hard to not distort my rings, but I'm just kind of poking it through and wiggling, and that's going to open us up a channel. See how much more open that is compared to that? So now I'm just wiggling that in. You could use a porcupine quill. A toothpick might be a little too soft. There we go. Let's see how that helps us out. Hopefully that'll have done the trick, because I don't like fighting with projects. Dadnabbit. Okay, here we go. Maybe? Please? Yeah. Okay, it went through. Sorry. Crafting noises. So now I'm gripping it and closing. Getting as good of a closure as I can. I can do a little better than that. Oops. Slip of the pliers, so it's okay. Now, next ring. Let's see if maybe this one will go through easier. And also something that might help is opening it up quite wide. Okay, feeding in that ring. And I'm just kind of wiggling it, trying to help it find its way through. There we go. Coming around, just like that. And now closing that ring. There we go. So now we've got these 3 little rings up here at the top that we can kind of cluster together. You can actually hide the closures of your rings inside the chainmail weave, because sometimes it can be really hard on these little rings whenever they've been under tension like that to get them perfectly closed. So you can just tuck it in. And now I'm going to take one more, thread it through all 3. Oops. There we are. Just like that. And close it. And then I'm going to double up on this ring, because that's a really wee bitty ring to just have all the weight of the pendant and all the stress of wearing it depend on. So let's give it a buddy. Happy little ring. There we go. Just getting our pliers in there and closing it. So now we're going to use these 16 gauge 1/4 inch rings, and I'm moving up to my bigger pliers that are black for some reason. There's no telling what I've been up to. Oh, leather dye. And I want to get a really nice clean closure on this. Now you don't have to use a chainmail ring. You could use some pre-made bails. And I think we might be able to actually double up on this, because I like the look of 2 rings as opposed to just 1. Can I fit in the second one through, though? Sure can. And close it. There we are, you guys. There's our little pendant. And now, I'll show y'all. We're going to use this DevCon 2-part 5-minute epoxy in clear. I really like the clear, especially whenever you have opaque stones like this. I mean, it's not completely translucent at all. Like, not opaque. I'm just saying words. This one's a little translucent. Like, if you hold it up, and light will go through it. But if you have, like, a quartz crystal or something, you know, very, very clear and easy to see through, or like some of the lighter toned banded agates, the clear won't impede that. So let me find a little piece of scrap paper that I can use to go across the back. Oops, just throwing stuff on the ground. Okay, so here I have a little card and a toothpick. For mixing, and I'm just going to take the tip off. Now also, I'm going to link to this epoxy where I get it on Amazon, and do not pay attention to it. It has like a 2-star review. This stuff is the most excellent in the whole wide world for that I've been able to find for this specific purpose. So you can see it measured out. One side was a little slow to start, but in the end it still measures them out the same. Now you have honestly about 3, maybe 3.5 minutes of working time before, I mean, it's not completely set until like 5 or 6 minutes, and even then I like to let it sit for 10 just to let any other stickiness go away. But you've only got about 3 minutes before it's going to be gooping up super weird. So let's stir this just as good as we can. You don't want to take more than about a minute on that, though. I don't worry about trapping air bubbles in it because, I mean, if it were a clear stone, I'd be more worried, but I'm much more concerned with just getting it mixed thoroughly. There's a 30-minute epoxy on the market by the same company. I don't recommend it for this purpose, and I'm just globbing it on with the toothpick. I don't recommend it for this purpose because it's quite runny, and it'll seep around to the front side of your stone. Now, I always mix up just a little too much just because, you know, I guess I'm heavy-handed on the plunger. So I have another stone set off to the side here that I was just gonna set all by itself in its chainmail. So it would be at this point, if you wanted to take this stone and do an edging all the way around it, that I would set a bezel into the back. Not a bezel. Oh, goodness, words. In my defense, I've not had coffee yet today. I don't know what I'm doing recording pre-coffee. A brooch pin or whatever. You could put this onto a hair clip and wear it on your head. I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. But yeah, so this is just another one that I decided to leave very plain on the sides. So I always keep like a backup pendant around, or I'll go through and like reinforce a piece of polymer clay, or, you know, something. And typically when I'm mixing up epoxy, I have a much larger mixing surface, and I'll have like, you know, 5 or 6 or more things that need epoxied, and I'll just do them in batches. But for the sake of this video, I'm just doing these couple. And now just making sure that it's gooped up nice and thoroughly into the edges. I mean, and you don't want to exceed your edges because it'll fill those holes, like I said. But I mean, if you've already done your wrapping, then that doesn't matter as much. But it's still, you know, the magic happens in the details. That's where crafts become craftsmanship, you know. It's we're not just gluing popsicle sticks together here. We're trying to make art, which popsicle sticks can be art. So yeah, there we are. And then we're just gonna let these harden up. This is still technically workable. There's just a little bit left on the sheet. But you don't want to let it, whenever it'll get sticky and stringy and gross. And at that point, it's not going to be binding as well. It's busy having its chemical reaction. It's going to be like not seeping very well. So after this, just let it sit and you have a new pendant. So that's that, y'all. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this tutorial. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, I'd love to hear from you. If you make something following along with any of my tutorials or just want to share pictures of what you've made, please check me out on Facebook and tag me on Instagram. There'll be links down in the video description below. And then also we do a Patreon campaign. If you guys like my free daily tutorials and would like to support the creation of more of them, beyond just liking, sharing, subscribing, and hopefully enjoying my videos, pledges start at just $1, and every little bit helps so much to keep just this whole machine going, making these tutorials and doing our giveaways. We do weekly giveaways now. Every week, Tuesday on my live streams, I announce a winner from our patrons for fairy houses, original art pieces, craft crates, which are something that we mail out monthly to our patrons also. Sometimes I just give away craft crates to whoever. So, but yeah, so to get your name in the hat for that, just be a $1 pledger, gets you into the hat once for the giveaways. If you become a $5 pledger, it gets you into the hat 5 times, and then kind of it goes up from there. But links will be down again in the video description below, and you can follow that and find out all about it. Also, you can just follow us on Patreon without having to pledge anything at all and get some access to behind the scene, like Patreon exclusive pictures and different things about, so you can see what tutorials we have upcoming and all sorts of different stuff. But thank you guys so much again for hanging out with me. Happy crafting. And if you're watching this whenever it's like just posted, Happy New Year. Bye.